sound of this guitar makes me want to know a little more about the instrument. It also makes me want to know more about the musician playing it. You're listening to Music Student 101. Today's guest, guitarist Carlos Pino. And now your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
Okay, today is a very
special.
Today is special. It's another special episode. Matt, do you remember last episode we kind of had a little fun talking about that podcast, S-Town?
Yes, I do.
And how Birmingham, this is kind of our little M-Town, music town.
We know so many people.
You're going to start to know all these characters. All these people are going to start. We have some, reestablishing of some characters here. Today we have Carlos Pino.
Yay!
Yay! And Carlos is going to talk to us about the guitar.
Okay. Sure.
Welcome, Carlos.
Hello.
Carlos, your little brother Oscar was in my 4th grade class.
Wow.
This is how interweaved.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, St. Rose. This is how interweaved
St. Rose, yes.
This town is here.
Mm-hmm.
And then here I meet you so many years later at UAB.
Yes.
The University of Alabama at Birmingham, which is where myself and Matt got our BAs.
And I did too.
And you did as well.
Yeah.
And I think you maybe were a little bit ahead of us. I think you're doing a lot.
Maybe a couple of years, but I took some time off, so I think I probably finished with you guys.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what was your main focus of study? Because I thought I remember seeing you with the jazz ensemble.
I actually was a music tech major. I was a double minor, if there's such a thing.
There was back then.
Spanish and history, and then but I took all the courses what was available then. It's changed a lot since I went there. I think I was in the 2nd year of the program.
Okay. And then you went on to the University of Alabama.
And I took some courses because at that time they didn't offer jazz, and I was getting into jazz guitar. So at that time they would let me take classes at Tuscaloosa. And so I took guitar, and then my teacher's an amazing arranger, so I took arranging as well out there. So and then I went off to Rutgers and got a master's back in the early 2000s in jazz studies.
Okay.
Yeah.
We were at one point trying to decide if we should have like an episode on jazz guitar, an episode on classical guitar, episode on rock guitar, but I think we're just going to try for now to encompass the guitar itself.
Yeah, I can do a little bit of all of those, so hopefully I can help out.
Well, like that intro music was very pretty, not very
not very jazzy.
Not very jazzy. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I was like living in New Jersey, and back when before you had your iPhone, you'd have your mini disc recorders, and sometimes I was just whistling a tune, and I played some chords and it fit, and then I just arranged it. And it was one of those tunes that it just came around in like 10 minutes. And so it has a little weird time signature change, and I haven't quite figured out what it is yet. But but it's just one of those things, like it just comes around, and so that's how that happened. Literally, I was just sitting in my apartment just whistling a tune, and I just put some chords to it.
And that's called country tune.
Country tune, because in New Jersey and Jersey City, that was kind of country sounding for up there, so I called it country tune. Yeah. It was way back old. It was like from 2000.
Well, I think it sounded great.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And that was you and a friend?
It's Brandon Peoples on bass, and we did a little CD maybe 6-7 years ago, and he's actually playing ukulele kind of like a mandolin player would, do the chunk. They give you that attack like a drum would that you hear in the background. That's him doubling on a ukulele. So it's Brandon, 2 of Brandon's and 1 me.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I'm playing slide and singing a little bit.
There's a band name in there somewhere.
Yeah.
2 Brandons and a Carlos.
That's very cool, man. Brandon, he's actually stood in for me for Tunnel Vision a long time ago.
Oh, really?
And he just busted. He gave him the charts, and he just knocked it right out.
Oh, yeah, he's great. And he teaches over at UAB also.
Oh.
Very versatile. Plays theater, does rock and roll, does church, does all types of things. Yeah.
Working musician.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Versatility is a great advantage in this line of work, as we have discussed before, right?
And you have to be versatile, but you have to be really good at one thing first. Instead of, I'm kind of a jack of all trades, but at least I'm good at one thing, and then I kind of branched out.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, once you understand one thing really well, it can be easier to transmute that knowledge
I think so.
To other things.
Yes. Yeah, I've had to learn because I do theater shows. I've had to learn how to play mandolin. I played violin in high school until my violin was stolen, but I used to play violin. And so learning the mandolin, it's like a guitar meets a mandolin, and or a banjo or ukulele or whatever.
Any of those things tuned in fits.
Yes, once you learn guitar, then I can translate it somehow to these other stringed instruments. So, yeah.
One of my favorite things that I ever saw you do in theater was when you performed Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
Yes.
And you were playing guitar. You were playing keyboards.
I forget my Bulgarian name or whatever the name was, that Vig or Sick or had these weird names, and Vic and yeah, I played keys in that show and then guitar.
And you sang also.
And I sang, which is a rare thing to see.
But versatility can keep you pretty busy in a small market like this.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I play bass. I grew up in college. There was no bass player. Or one that read, so I played in the big band. I played jazz bass, and so that no one calls me for that. But it's good as a teacher to be able to teach it. Now every once in a while I'll go out and play bass.
It can be fun.
Yeah.
Matt, I think we've mentioned at some point that you and I are both bass players.
Yeah, I think that's come up once or twice.
Maybe about 100 times, maybe.
Yeah, it's come up every episode. is the joke.
It's our ongoing joke. We'll let you in on that.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get into it. Speaking of being a working musician.
Okay.
Kind of tell us about where you are now and some of your accomplishments and some of your influences.
I'll tell you what I'm doing. Okay, accomplishments. Well, I guess other than finishing college.
Which is a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, in getting a master's, that really helped me in the sense of, it helped me as a player. But it opens doors for you for working. And as a teacher, I think just having that on your resume just open the door. People just call me because they need a guitarist of a certain amount of talent. But because I have that degree, it's open doors. So it's open doors for teaching in colleges, and just people. It's like it's been very helpful for me to be able to go when I go overseas and teach. My family's from Colombia, and through a long story, I go down there and do clinics with bands, different types of bands, and it's just helpful to have that experience, the knowledge on the instrument, in order to teach. So because of that, I was able to go and, like I just said, teach to people in different countries, different country, and in different cities, different ages, and teach just music and teach guitar. And so I think that's the biggest thing I can say, and that's an ongoing thing I've been doing for over 10 years.
What an experience.
Oh, yeah, because it's great. One of the first times I did it, I went with the University of Alabama, actually, through this thing called the Centro Colombo Americano, and it's like a foundation that it's an English school, but they have a cultural dynamic where they set up an interchange of cultures, American culture. So you get to meet a lot of people. They learn about your music, or you could be an artist, or you could be a bluegrass musician, just something American. From Star Wars, all sorts of things, but then you get to meet a lot of people, and you get to show them because they're very really talented people down there, especially on guitar. But like blues, like people take it for granted here that blues is like in everything, but down there they're hard rockers and they're into the Columbia music, but they don't really do blues so well. So if you can show them that, they really appreciate it, and that's a lot of fun. You can see people progress. So. As far as playing, just getting to do a lot of musicals. I think I've gotten more done as far as teaching. But every once in a while I get to do some big shows, and that's kind of cool.
So influences. Who influenced you to become a musician or to become a guitar player?
I don't know about you guys. My mom plays guitar. My parents used to host a lot of parties, and so she would play or someone else would play, and they would host a lot of parties. And so there would be a lot of dancing. So there's always music going on.
Yeah, wow.
And but just the most directly, there was always guitars in my house. And there was a piano. And I think they just appreciated that. So it's just around. I remember just staring at it, and I didn't know how it worked. and I'd pick it up. And then I think, but parents, I guess, my brother had a really good taste in music, so he had a lot of tapes and records around, stuff that I didn't know. So I got to check out a lot of that older music, bands from the 60s, psychedelic era. And then getting into more older blues musicians, just from my older brother, and hang around with his group of friends. Mm-hmm. So that was a big influence. At my school, they would take us to the symphony every once in a while, and that was really cool. And when I was in Columbia, I was born in New Orleans, so growing up as a little kid, I was there till 3. But then we'd go back every year. So I remember just walking by myself as a little kid around the quarter, which is kind of scary now. But I used to do it all the time. I would just leave for an hour and just go walk around like Bourbon Street by myself. And
you can hear a lot of music that way.
Yeah.
You can. Yeah, I have images of these guitarists. I remember this guy holding like an orange, you'd walk in. It was in the middle of the day. And he was using his microphone stand as a slide. He was just doing, you're a kid. This is kind of bizarre. What's this guy doing? Kind of Jimi Hendrix kind of stuff. Yeah. So that's also a big thing. And I think people forget, if you're from that area, and how unique that is, the New Orleans, and just the amount of music there is.
Oh, yeah. There are styles that don't exist anywhere else.
That's true. But just that, it's just like water. It's just everywhere. It's like food. You have to have it, and the kids really pick up on it. So I think those are some of the influences.
So you were almost born a guitar player, or almost grew up a guitar player.
I grew up, yeah. My mom played, and she could play. She still plays, and then then they put us in. I started in first grade piano and played till 12th grade or something. Wow. And I wasn't very good, but I could play. I can play one hand really well, either hand. I just cannot do them together.
That's about where I'm
That's
at.
me.
Yeah. So, but it's useful. It still is useful, and the piano was a useful tool with guitar, because guitar is such an oddball instrument. Piano's linear. You can only play that one note in one place, where on the guitar you can play one note in 4 to 5 different places with different fingers and different. So it's much more. It's not a linear instrument.
Right.
It's a pattern-oriented. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. So, but if you use a piano, in my mind, it still makes everything easier. So that was something that really helped me out as a kid, is having played piano.
Being able to relate it to.
Relate it to anything.
Yeah.
It's sort of the universal instrument, at least in terms of teaching and pedagogy.
I think so. I think it's the best, so far, the best structure or visual way of identifying harmony, intervals.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
we always like to ask this question, but I think I already know the answer.
Okay, I'm not sure. Okay.
Because I didn't think you already answered it. Did you find the guitar, or did the guitar find you?
It's kind of both, I guess. I mean, I remember my parents. I remember my first guitar lesson. There used to be, because I was interested in taking violin around the same time, there was this place called Miller Violin Shop.
Yeah.
It used to be right on Green Springs. Anyway, this place in town is this little old couple. They were very old. They were in their early 80s, making violins and selling them. And I remember going there. My teacher, he ended up moving and had a lesson there. So I was around violins, around guitar. And it just stuck, and I just really. And my dad said, "Do you want to keep doing this?" And and I said, "Yes." It was just something I really enjoyed, even though something about it that I wanted to keep wanting to learn about.
That's great.
Yeah, so that was kind of the moment.
We can all relate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you play a lot of jazz.
I do. Yeah. As much as you can. Here in the city, there is some jazz, but there's not so many venues for it all the time.
Right.
You'll get it sporadically. So there's not many clubs where you have seven nights a week jazz. So
Is there any anymore?
There was.
There are, and not here.
Yeah,
but there used to be. There used to be a place called Grundy's.
Yeah.
That was before my time, but that was in a jazz bar here, where they had live music most of the week. Yeah.
And then when you're not playing jazz, you play blues.
Well, I grew up playing blues. I mean, I really you got into Led Zeppelin and that kind of Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Page, those type, Eric Clapton, those kind of people. And then you obviously go back and you're like, whoa, those British guys listen to people from this area. And I always thought there was a lot of blues here, but there really isn't so much blues in Alabama. There's a few, but you really have to go to Mississippi, Texas, some Tennessee.
Right,
so a little bit of here, Johnny Shines and people like that. So in any case, I always wonder, why can't I find a blues band to play in? And there never was. And there was jam bands, and I started getting into that, out of the psychedelic music. And I got into that, and then and from that I kind of morphed into jazz, hard rock stuff. It was hard rock and then jazz, and so which one am I going to do more? And so I kind of veered more into the jazz than the hard rock stuff.
Yeah, I'm just hearing a plethora of styles here, from jazz to blues to rock to sort of psychedelic rock to jazz again.
Yeah, like the Grateful Dead is kind of like a little hybrid, but then I like more bands, the art rock, like the Jethro Tull and Yes, and then like I still have a thing for South American music, especially with guitar, and I never grew up playing using my fingers, and so there was an amazing guitarist who came here to study. He had friends who were in the symphony here, and he played this instrument called the tiple, which is like a tenor guitar. It's instead of a 12-string with six sets of 2 strings.
Right.
The jangly sounding guitar. Yeah. It was 4. Anyway, this guy was he had won all these awards, and he was learning cello, and he's an amazing guitarist. So I got to study with him in high school. And it was like a reality check. He's like, yeah, he's pretty good, meaning me, but his fingers don't work, So it's good to get that like positive reinforcement and negative. But So from that, I got to learn some traditional Colombian string music, like mountain music.
Wow,
like they're called bambucos and pasillos. A lot of waltzes. Yeah. Would
you say those things have influenced your style now when you go to write a song? All that stuff
it's weird. I write a lot of songs in 3. I don't know. I don't write many songs in 4. Even when I write just a song, like with words for myself, because I'm not a good singer. But they're usually in 3.
Oh, that's interesting.
And they always, in live that music, when I was growing up, the music always, there's a section major, and then the bridge will always go to minor.
Right.
And then it has this kind of structure to it. And for some reason, I use that in my songs. You just pick up stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. It all becomes a part of who you are as a musician, I think.
I guess so. Yeah. And I played in one of these modern Hillsong church kind of things where you have like 3 reverb pedals and 4 delay pedals. That's your sound. It's more about the sound than what you're playing. Which is fine, but you learn it's just another style, so it's kind of cool to learn that kind of stuff. And bluegrass I'm not good at, but at least I kind of understand the structure and the kind of the rhythm. That does not come easy to me.
Flat picking,
it's very painful to me. I just don't have the right arm of steel to do that. But
you have to keep the whole arm rigid, don't you? It's like
there's in some of the vocabulary, it's all about how your fingers fit on the guitar versus what scale you're using. So all that chromaticism, these notes, that non-diatonic, since we're talking theory stuff.
Sure.
It's just about how it lays on your fingers, where you are on the neck of the guitar. It is why you play those notes, not necessarily because you're in a scale. So anyway, but I'm not good at that. I'm kind of more traditional, unless it's blues. And with blues, I'm more flexible. But if it's otherwise, I'm kind of, I guess that all that schooling kind of affected me.
So it affects all of us.
Yeah. So when you're writing your own music, or if you were describing your own style of music, you're saying you automatically kind of go to the waltzes.
I go to songs in 3. I go to like more new agey kind of music, kind of more open-ended sounding music. I'm not sure why. Consonant or a little open, like no lyrics. It's just a mood. If you like, for example, some of these bands like with open-ended jams, open-ended improv. Sometimes it's not about just a lead guitar. Sometimes it's about this kind of organic thing that happens when a band develops a groove or a pattern, and I like that kind of music. So open-ended sounding music, yeah.
That's great. It's actually, I think a lot of contemporary classical has gone that way in a lot of years. Kind of going towards things that are attempting to create a mood. More so than having a beginning, a middle, and an end, or a melody, quote unquote. It's something that's trying to create more of a mood. And more
and it's also sometimes not an issue of virtuosity.
Right. Yeah.
It's just set like Steve Reich. I love Steve Reich.
Oh yeah.
And some of that stuff is virtuosic, just because you have the mental challenge of rhythms and stuff.
Yeah.
But you're only playing 4 notes for 10 minutes.
Yeah, and for our listeners who may not know, Steve Reich is a minimalist, and he's famous for having something very, very repetitive, but then he created a technique called phasing. Mm-hmm. So 2 people might be doing the same thing, but one it will then play it an eighth note behind,
sure,
and then a quarter note, and
it'll slow, and then the appearance. It's like taking a picture and turning the picture sideways. It's the same picture, but it looks like it did something else.
Right? Yeah.
And you turn it upside down. It's your mom's picture, and upside down. It's, well, who is that? But it's your mom. You don't know that's your mom. It's the same, and that's pretty cool. And you find that in different kind of like gamelan music, or you just take, or you hear like Afro-Cuban. You have all these people playing just a simple part, and just depending on where they put the note, it creates a mood or a color or a. It's pretty cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. So the more you learn this kind of hard stuff, if you can simplify it, I find that interesting. How to take all this difficult stuff and then boil it down to something easy, accessible that people like.
This sort of becomes more than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about your instructors. Were there particular instructors that you felt really were very good? Did they have particular methods that you liked or disliked?
I think with guitar, I'm just going to talk about guitar at least at first.
Sure.
I had a classical guitarist teacher, a guy named Brian Lutterby.
Ah, yeah.
And he's great. He's great as far as you learn the pedagogy. You start with a certain era and you develop the basic technique, and then you teach them some music. It's really just learning songs, learning pieces of a certain level that you're able to play, or you're almost able to play, and then you move on to another era. And with jazz, it's a little harder because the eras go by so fast. Instead of being 50 years of one type of music, it's boiled down to like 8.
Huh.
Like modal jazz was maybe almost 10 years. I mean, people still do it now, but like when it was like the thing to do, or free jazz, well, that's still happening, but when it was the new thing, when everybody seemed to be doing it, it was a short amount of period of time. Or swing, 10 years. So it's hard to find, especially guitar music. There's not so much guitar music for that was the original. It was not the original instrument for some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a guessing game when it comes to jazz. If I'm just teaching rock and roll, or just, you start with the basic. You learn the basic idea of chords, how to the basics of rhythm, counting, so you don't get lost, how to play with other people, and then you just learn more and more pieces. Sometimes you start with the most modern and go backwards, or depending on style, you start with the oldest, like classical music, to the most modern. So it just depends who you're dealing with, like especially for me, if I'm teaching at home and a private student or at school, the requirements are different.
So, what about those requirements? What do you expect from your students? What is a student who's doing well? What is that student doing? How do they do a good job?
I guess you have to go, if they're going to be there for, say, if they study with you for 2 years, at the end of the whole thing, they should have some concept of, their foundation in harmony, be able to know your scales, blah blah, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Be able to read. And why do you read? Because it's information.
Right.
And if you can't get the information, you're not useful to be functional with other people, because they're able to get the information faster.
Oh, it's the same as being illiterate in words.
That's exactly right.
You could, you can face real challenges if you don't know how to read music. And the communication just goes by so much faster in a practical sense, and your understanding of how the music is constructed, can be very dependent on your ability to not just hear it, but also see it.
I think it's possible for people. There are people much better than me who don't read at all.
Right.
But for the majority of us human beings, reading helps to be able to. So at the end of a certain amount of time, the reading helps so that you can learn a lot more on your own. You need to be able to teach yourself. That's one thing in a general way. But they should know. Have some knowledge of pieces from different eras, and be able to know the difference of what era you're listening to of music. People think jazz. Jazz is many things, just like rock and roll. And then to be able to play in the style of any of those genres. Yeah. So I think one of the coolest things I learned in college and my undergraduate is the word aesthetics, and I always thought that was one of the coolest things. It's kind of basically a laundry list of what defines a style of music.
Right. Yeah.
Like swing music, there's a swing rhythm, and the harmonies are more complex. So that's what I try to teach a guitarist. Learning to play with the pick, learning to use your fingers, learning to improvise, learning to sight read.
Yeah.
Those are just all different talents. Some people are better at certain aspects of it.
Yeah, and different styles pursue different aesthetics.
That's right.
So
like blues, like some people think blues is Jimi Hendrix, or now it's Stevie Ray Vaughan. But then they don't think, well, the other people play that style. So you have to listen to a lot of musicians. So you also have to teach people how to listen to music.
Yeah, to me, Stevie Ray Vaughan is coming towards the end of blues. It's like,
no, he's fantastic.
So much,
he's fantastic, but he's still kind of recent.
Yeah, there's such a huge tradition of blues. Before you get up to what Stevie Ray Vaughan is, and he's amassed all of those. He listened to all of that.
Right. So exactly right. So you might have Lightning Hopkins. You hear him as a guy who sings, plays guitar with an acoustic guitar. He drops the beat every once in a while, but it works somehow, and it's still fantastic. It's a whole different thing than Chuck Berry, or
Right.
And so you have to know you have to be able to define what makes this music different from another. What aesthetically, how's it unique?
Right,
and that's something as a guitar player is very helpful, because then they'll figure out how to play each style, and then they'll choose what they like and be good at that one style.
Sure, yeah.
It's just helping them understand what they're listening to and how you apply it to the guitar.
Yeah. A question about reading music, since we kind of talked about it just a little bit. How important do you think that is for your students? Compared to tablature, for example.
Okay, I'll start with reading. I mean, what is your goal? Like, you have students who just want to learn some songs, which is good, but if they're just learning it for their own enjoyment and that's the end of it, is one thing. But if you're learning to find a profession, you are expected to do things other people can't do.
Yeah.
It's that kind of simple.
Sure.
And so for that reason, if I'm needing to learn how to play some song, I just play it, or it takes a little bit of time for me to learn sight read something. So that's helpful. So there are two different ways of reading music on the guitar. It's standard notation with the 5 lines, with the treble clef or bass clef, whatever. Then there's something called tablature, and from my understanding, that I'm not a historian of classical guitar, but I think that system is actually as old as the notation we have for.
I think you may be right about that.
Yeah,
it's evolved over the years, but some kind of tablature is as old as the guitar. I mean, it goes back to the Renaissance Spanish guitar players and things.
Yes, so 1500s. And what we think of the guitar now with the round shape, you think of Spanish guitar, with that tan kind of color, all acoustic. That kind of comes from Spain, but there were guitars around before, but different sizes. There were lutes, massive things. So anyway, that system, tablature, is really useful for a lot of young students because it's very difficult to sight read on a guitar. Like I said on the piano, if I saw a middle C, the little black dot with the one little line through it, the ledger line, that's in the very center of the piano. And I can't really demonstrate it, but you can hear it. So I'm going to play one note. This is middle C on one string. Here it is on another string. Here's another string. Here's another string. I'm running out of frets now. So it makes it so much harder to, where do I play? There's 10 ways to play this. Mm-hmm. So if you just tell them exactly what fret to play it on, and that's how tablature helps you play, there's a line that represents a string, and there's a number, and that's what fret you play. It doesn't tell you what fingers or how fast or slow to play it. That part you have to use just your innate kind of natural sense of musicality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think both are good, but the tablature it only has half the information.
Right. We kind of talked about how you can't really get a sense of dynamics with tablature?
Well, yes, and there's other things that you find on standard notation. Well, I guess you could put that also on tablature, but how loud to play, what type of attack, or you want an emotional kind of component,
Rhythmic values.
Rhythmic values. You usually don't
ones.
find that in tablature, but modern tablature, I'm not sure about classical tablature.
I wouldn't know about classical tablature myself either. And of course, written sheet music is a universal language. So the thing that you could play on a guitar could conceivably also get played on a piano.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, a piano player would have no idea how to play something in tablature.
Well, it's just not giving him any information, really.
No.
It would make no sense unless they already played guitar. So
Right.
I can look at a tablature and then I kind of like slowly play it. But that's a lot of translating in my head to do it on the fly.
When I was first in college, when I first started playing and learning to read, I was very good at reading tablature because that's what I'd done as a teenager, and not so great at reading actual music. As I learned to read actual music over the years, I realize now I'm good at reading music. I'm not as great at reading tablature anymore. It kind of doesn't come as naturally as it used
I guess
to.
I'm the same way, especially when you do things like bending notes. When you bend a string, it makes the note sound higher. So when you write tablature, do you write the note where you're putting your fingers or where it sounds like it is? So that's a little confusing. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, in sheet music, we have a symbol for that. Nice happy little,
Oh, the little
slit.
like curve up.
Yeah, the little slur up thing. Yeah. So, practicing.
Practicing.
How
yes.
much do you practice?
It goes in waves. If I'm working a lot and I'm playing a lot out,
Practice less?
I practice less. And sometimes you have to motivate. If I have something coming up, like some kind of concert or a gig, I have to learn the music. And in the music, and if we're improv type music, you have to be able to improv over it. And some tunes are harder than others, or some might have a rhythm or a chord change that might be unusual. So how am I going to get through that? And so as far as a schedule, I still practice a lot more classical guitar than jazz guitar, which is really weird because I don't ever get to play classical guitar.
Right, yeah, so.
But it also, if you develop a good right hand, with arpeggios and tremolo, that sort of thing, it helps with my picking. So it's just like if you're like working out, if you just like lift weights with your left arm, and then you don't use your right arm, then it's going to be kind of uneven. So if I use all my fingers and practice using my fingers, then when I use a pick, which I use a lot more for jazz and rock and roll,
Right.
that helps. Scheduling, I'll try to find something I'm really bad at, and then work on that for like 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
That's a great tip.
Yeah. And then I'll always play a tune like I'm bad with sweeps. Sweep is, I can do in one direction really easy, but the other way is really hard for me. So I've been trying to just pick it up and just do that for 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
I practice my sweeps on the bass a lot for that very same reason, because it feels awkward.
And it is, and so I have to really sit and like, oh my gosh, I'm like 14 again. I cannot do this.
Yeah.
So I do that. That's the main thing, If I'm going to have to do a recording, make sure I'm going through the pieces to memorize them, or a gig.
Yeah.
It depends what are you practicing for. If I'm just running scales for scales, that's cool too, if I'm not good at it. So if I get to a comfortable space, sometimes you have to practice playing for speed, because I have slow hands. I have slow hands. My right hand just does not go past 130. It just will not. And I know that from practicing.
Right.
So I have to find other ways to play at a faster tempo. And you do that, you're kind of planning ahead. Why am I practicing? Otherwise, you're just playing songs.
Yeah.
You
can do that all day.
And that's fine, but I know people who know hundreds of songs, but they can't necessarily break out of their little box.
Yeah. There's always going to be a lot of things you can't do if you it seems to me that if you're practicing what feels comfortable for you, it can be a great ego boost. You feel better about yourself because you're doing it well.
You're doing what you're already good at.
Yeah, you're doing what you're already good at, but you ask yourself, well, are you progressing when you do that?
So I guess on the guitar, when I was practicing a lot more, I would do right hand exercises to get warmed up. I would do like arpeggios with my right hand, different patterns. I'll do this one for like 30 seconds to a set tempo. Example, using my first 3 fingers, block chords, things like that, then scales with my fingers, and then I'll practice scales with my right hand. And instead of just playing one scale and over, and on guitar you can fall into a pattern where you just play the same scale, just like bar chords. It's the same shape. I'll try to play all the scales, like all 12 in one position. That's something one of my teachers showed me, and using the circle of fifths. The circle of fifths is just like certain keys, like if I'm in key of C, you just go up 5 letters. You can use your pinky, your fingers. C,
And
D, E, F, G. And
check out what episode number was that, Jeremy?
Oh,
when we discussed the circle of fifths?
We did have an circle of fifths.
There's an episode called Circle of Fifths. Go check that out.
And every time you go up one of the circle fifths, you just change one note. So if you learn your notes really well on the guitar in one area of the guitar, when you play this other scale, it's just going to be slightly different. And then when you go up a fifth, it's going to be just slightly different, and it keeps changing. So C, then I go up to G. New note. New note.
Oh, that's great.
And then you go up a fifth, and then that note that's a C sharp. Well, we didn't have C sharp in the key of C. And I do that, and then I'll do this. Then I'll do arpeggios. And then you practice that sort of thing. And you can do that, etc. And then I try to learn that. Then you can practice scales and patterns and intervals. Then you try to do that with other types of scales. That's just major. So really no major. If you can't do major, don't worry about all these weird scales. Just know major
learn
on your
major
instrument, like where you don't have to know all 12, and then worry about all these other scales.
Yeah.
That's the scale we use to reference all the other scales.
It's
right.
like it's the gold standard. It's, yeah.
There's a fascinating history of its own.
So to me, it sounds like one way that you challenge yourself is to just your weaknesses and just sit there and face them head on.
Let me say one thing. What I was saying earlier about try to find something that you're not good at and practice it. Playing with other people. Some people get a false sense of how good they are. They think they're really good at something until they're put in a situation with other musicians, maybe even of a worse level. But it could, obviously with people at a higher level than yourself. When you play, whether it be classical, bluegrass, jazz, whatever, you'll find that you think you're really good at something, then you play out, then you struggle. Yeah. So that's a good judge of how good you are or what you need to work on.
Listening to what another person is doing is a skill that can only be gained by playing with other people.
Sure.
And I don't care how tight you think your rhythm is, until you're playing with a bunch of people who all have to stay in the same rhythm.
Because, like I said, you could be the best person on the stage, and then you're playing with people who aren't as good as you.
Or not, and
then you have to be able to adjust. So even though you might be right, if you just say, "Well, you're wrong and I'm right," that's not going to help anybody.
Are you really the best musician at that point? Or are you the one person who?
To make it work, you have to work with people. So someone, for example, if I'm in a band and the drummer's slowing down.
Right.
I could just say, I'm going to just keep going my own speed, and then suddenly it sounds like two people playing different songs. You have to work, and that's from learning to listen. Yeah. And then learning to also know how much you can let that person slow down without saying, hey, man, you're slowing down. So there's a limit each way.
I played in rock bands. All my drummers sped up. So I had the opposite problem.
When to stop being polite and start being a musician.
Well, and I rush. I always still rush, so I have to work on that, and that's sometimes listening to drummers. And that's something I learned from playing with people that I tend to rush, and that's something I learned from
invaluable experience.
Yeah, important. You probably own a few guitars.
Yeah.
Which one do you have a favorite, or is that even fair?
Well, I just bought this guitar just last week. I was it was a rainy day.
Guitar is beautiful, by the way.
It's a Bulgarian guitar. It's a Cremona.
Huh.
And apparently some guitar teacher in town ordered it, but it came with electronics, so he didn't want it. But it's slightly shorter scale. I'm not a big guy. So it's like maybe an inch shorter than a standard classical.
Oh God, I can.
But it has a wider neck.
Yeah.
And so I bought it. So I have this guitar. It's called the Cremona.
It sounds beautiful.
And I have. What was your question? What, do I own more than one guitar?
Well, do you have a particular one that you enjoy the most? Or?
Well, I have one that I had made for me in Colombia. And there is a certain type of guitar, like I said before, in Colombia we have more string instrument music, and then we have more instruments, type of music that uses more horns, piano, think like salsa music. So, but if you, Andean music,
yeah,
there's an instrument that's called a requinto, and it's basically like a guitar with a capo on the 3rd fret. So if you play a C chord, it's actually an E flat. And it's that guitar that does that kind of sound that you hear in that kind of boleros and stuff.
Absolutely. Love it.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I had that, and there's a guy named Tito. So I went in the store looking for one. It was my cousin who lives in Cali. He said, "Well, look, man, on the sticker on the inside of the guitar, there's his address. Let's just go to his store." When he drove to this like warehouse district, and there he was. And so I said I wanted a concert. And he said, "Well, what do you want on it?" And I said, "Well, I want like a round sound hole, and I want the fretboard to kind of go float over." And he built it for me. It was really cool.
No way.
So I have it, and that's the guitar I don't ever take out. I just leave it at home. That's my little fun for myself. Wow. Every other instrument I have a use for it. I'm not a rich guy or anything. So I like nice guitars, but if I don't use them, I end up getting rid of them. Mm-hmm. So I have different types of guitars for different settings. I have nylon guitars. So originally these guitars, they're made out of wood, but some of the parts like the bridge, what the strings rest on, used to be made out of bone, for example. Now they use plastic, but nice guitars still have bone. Mm-hmm. The strings used to be, unfortunately, out of like lamb guts. I hate to say that, but that's what they're made out of. And so with the advent of nylon and like plastics, we don't use that. And then steel strings, we don't have to kill animals in order to have guitar music.
It's my understanding catgut was just a general term. It really was typically lamb.
Lamb. And you can still buy those, for example, on ukuleles. You can go online, look on YouTube, and they show you the process of they'll wash them, they hang them, how you wind them, they dry them. And there is a difference in sound. Just like drum heads used to use lamb skin.
Yeah.
And there's a sound.
Yeah.
And just like, like some old classical guitars use rosewood, and some of those, not so many of those trees around. So the result is the guitars that you buy now sound different. Mm-hmm. But in any case, I have, this is a classical. I have a classical that I dropped on the floor. It no longer works. And then I have another one that just is worn out, a Japanese one, a Takamine. Uh-huh. The one, and then I have a steel string guitar. I have a couple of those, and then I have a Strat, like a 335, and then I have an arch top guitar, I think like a Joe Pass kind of guitar, and then I have little smaller instruments like Colombian instruments, a requinto, a bandola, which is kind of like a mandolin instrument, a mandolin, a tiple, a charango, which is, think of like El Condor Pasa with, that.
We talked about that in our pentatonic scale episode.
Used to be, it has the shape of an armadillo because traditionally, they don't do it anymore. It would use an armadillo shell as the shape. Uh-huh. So when you see a requinto, it's the shape of an armadillo. And that's, you don't really see that anymore. But so I have all those, and then a banjo, and then
5-string?
A 5-string, but I take a string off. I play it like a 4-string.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. This is just backwards to me. I just tried. It's so hard mentally, not the fingers, just the mentally, where the notes are. It's like anyway. It's amazing those guys that can do it.
I've got a tenor banjo that I just tune for Les mandolin tuning.
Yeah. See, I can understand that. That's why I tune it that way. And the strings can handle that, the amount of tension. So yeah, those are what I have. And then I also have a bass guitar. And then I have a piano and organ, just for writing or for gigs. You got to have those available. The guitar is like shoes. You can't go out, to a wedding and and your flip-flops, or vice versa. You know,
Right.
they have different roles. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
Do you want to talk about amps?
Maybe just, what do you think?
I have one amp.
Hey, there we go. That's easy.
I have little amps, little practice amps, and then there's a guy in town, a guy named Sam Timberlake, who makes great custom amps, and I've had this one for like 10 years or more, or 12 years. Great amp. He makes and he can make them. He's a guy who can make it sound like a traditional Fender amp, or it can be like a hot rod amp, all in one amp,
Does Sam Timberlake have his own shop here in Birmingham, or is he working?
He works at a place called Highland Music.
Highland Music, yeah.
But so he repairs amps and things, but he also builds his own amps and sells them online through the store. And I highly recommend them.
Birmingham listeners, check him out.
Yeah, Sam Amp, like one word, but the word Sam and Amp together.
He's been doing it for at least 20 years. Seems like
It's got to be 15, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that I know of.
Cool. Here we go. What are your thoughts on 6+ like 7-string instruments, like multiple string?
It's pretty cool. It just depends what you want. I mean, like Steve Vai had like a super small string on the top, and he would take a mandolin string, so it was the last string, and he could get these extremely high notes, and that's kind of rare. Most people, they put an extra string on the bottom.
Right, yeah. That's what I'm more familiar with.
So you hear it now on all these these thrash kind of bands. I don't know what you call it, where they tune everything down to low C's and low.
Yeah.
But in a lot of Brazilian music, they have a violão. It's like a 6-string classical guitar with an extra low. And that guy's job, there's no upright bass player. He's like, he's doing
I think I've seen that before.
Yeah, and so he's doing rhythm, but then he's doing all these bass lines that are counterpoint to the melody, which is really cool. And they get these really great low sounds. It looks just like a classical guitar. So I like that because I like a lot of Brazilian stuff. It's just a lot to think about. I use the big string on the guitar as my anchor of everything. So when I've played a 5-string bass for fun, out of necessity,
That messed with me.
I could not play it.
Yeah.
Then that's just me getting old, I guess. If I was younger, and I probably would be fine with it. So.
Nah.
Just
I was.
just a learned skill, man.
It's something you just gotta do over because I got sick of it. I was like, I got my 5-string bass, and I was just sick of it. I couldn't get my hands in there to slapping pop, which I didn't do.
You always end up playing down a fifth. You end up playing the same progression in the wrong key.
And I think my resting place is with my finger on the low E string. It's kind of my resting default position. So yeah, I can see that.
Well, you can still do that. I'm visual, so it would just mess.
See now when I go to a 4-string, I feel like I don't have enough strings. I'm constantly trying to go down to play on that 5th string, and it's not there.
You hear that? You want to hear that low?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that's just me.
Yeah.
So how do you maintain your instrument? How do you keep it at its best?
Okay, well, because these instruments are made out of wood, keep them away from the window. Just like they say in pianos, don't put them against the, in the sunlight where it heats up the instrument and cools it down, or don't put it against the wall where it heats up, put an interior wall. These keep them away from your air conditioning or your heating because they can dry out, and like if it's rainy, they're made out of wood, they absorb, so they will actually expand and contract. So in the winter, it's probably the worst time, especially if it's dry and then you're having central heating. Keep them in the case away from any kind of central heat. So that's the first thing. As far as changing strings, I change the strings when they start to strings, by the way, when they get worn out, just like old shoes don't bounce back, like the soles, the strings will, first of all they start to sound more muffled, and then they start playing out of tune. So I could tune the open string, but as soon as I get to the 3rd fret, it'll sound out of tune. So that's the time to change it. Wipe the guitar down. If you're using, people sweat, and the oil and sweat builds up. And if you just keep it in the case and you don't leave it in your car like in the winter or in the summer, it should be fine if it's a good instrument. But if something cracks or something, take it to the guitar store. I mean, most instruments, even if they break the neck, it can be fixed. But avoid that.
Yeah, avoid that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, it's mine. Especially for bass players, because all you're doing is touching your instruments with your hands. So
Yeah.
when you're getting those little dead skin particles and sweat and all those little things in there, it's kind of takes away from the brightness of the strings. It tends to build up and deaden them.
And that deadening can be so gradual that if you play all the time, you don't necessarily notice it until you get new strings, and I go, wow.
Changing strings does get expensive, though. If you have more than one guitar and you play a lot, some people can go through a set of strings in a couple of nights. Some people, just from the amount of acid or oil, in your fingers, and just the way it reacts, or if they sweat, you just gotta get. They have to change them. Luckily, I'm not that way. I can go a pretty long time with a set of strings.
Well, very good, man. All right, here is the obligatory history lesson.
Oh, wow.
For our listeners.
Okay, well, help me out here. That's a long. It's like, where do we start?
It's obligatory now.
It is obligatory because we said we were going to do some history.
Did we? Okay.
At some point, we promised history to these people.
Oh, well, we promised music history. We still have never delivered.
We did one episode on prehistoric music.
You're right, yeah, and that's about as close as we got.
Does it count as history if it's prehistoric? Okay, so according to the Encyclopedia Britannica.
You still have one of those? Oh, awesome.
I got a whole set of them.
Nice.
Nah, I got it on the internet,
okay.
On the interwebs.
See, that was.
But they have a website. They do.
Yeah. All right.
Like you were saying, actually, it originated in Spain. Now, there were other kind of guitar, like you were saying, the lutes.
There are lutes. That's more of a European. There's the oud, which is more Middle Eastern. There were mandolins. So mandolins are basically like fret. What makes guitar unique is that it has frets. Frets are those little metal wire that they kind of hammer into the neck of the guitar. And that was around. There were there were violas, viola da gambas, that look like a viola or like a cello, but they have frets on them. So it's been around a long time. What made this guitar unique is finding the right shape, the size, because lutes were massive, and they're like 6 feet across, and the right shape and the number of strings. And then because even early guitars, they did not have the standard tuning of E, A, D, G, B, E. A lot of times would have an F sharp, like a lute tuning. Or they would tune them to F, with the F as the bass note. So it wasn't just the 6 strings, it was coming up with the standard tuning, using the standard notes of E, A, D, G, B, and E. And apparently that happened in Spain. I guess Spain was kind of like a melting pot, kind of like because of the Moors, the Arabic influence, and the Jewish influence, and obviously the European, the Iberian.
Yeah, so it created a musical culture that was unique in Europe.
Yes,
like particularly unique in Europe.
And so that's why when you hear flamenco music, they have that weird modal.
Yeah.
And you can think of that as kind of like sounding a lot like Arabic music, that all that kind of stuff. There's some of that there, the more modal kind of sound. But anyway, getting back to the guitar. So there were great teachers for example, in Italy, but Spain is kind of where this body type came about. What we called the Spanish or nylon string or Spanish guitar.
With the wasted body.
Yeah, with like the curvy, like think of a woman. Yeah, like the curvy, yeah, that sort of thing.
As opposed to the more gourd shape of the bouzouki or the oud or...
Yes, and they were also you can call them parlor guitars, which are like the width is much more narrow, almost looking like a ukulele, a little like between a standard guitar now and a ukulele. So anyway.
Very cool. Well, that was back in the 1500s, like you were saying, in Spain. It was the guitarra latina was the ancestor. It was 4 strings and with courses, like you were saying, or like a 12 string.
Courses means they would be like, instead of pressing like on a mandolin, you'd press more than one string, but they were so close together, you treat them as one string.
Right.
And they were tuned to the same note.
Yeah.
Like this. Instead of, it'd be 2 notes, technically.
Unison.
Yeah. Like if you open up your piano and you play a note, you're really playing not just one string, you're playing 3 right beside each other to get more volume. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. I think I had for one of the original tunings was a CFAD tuning with 3 courses, and then the top was a single
Interesting.
note.
Interesting. So I don't know the date of the 6-string version. There have been 5-string guitars, different. There have been guitar hybrids, guitar harps. We want some extra notes. So it's kind of like a lute. That's what a lute basically is. So you'll have a guitar, and then they just attach this massive thing, and there are these like 5 or 6 low notes that you play with no frets.
Yeah. That's a cool.
Not even attached to the neck sometimes.
Yeah, and it must weigh a ton. And you have some more modern, especially like New Age. I would think of Michael Hedges, one of the guys who made them popular. Now you see a lot of people using them. They're much more available.
Well, it was in the late 18th century that the sixth course was added.
Oh, okay. So then I was stand corrected. I thought it was much later.
Well, and
earlier.
Well, actually, just according to this, that's when they also added they added a 6th course, and then they also took off the courses. They just made it single strings towards the later part of that.
And I stand corrected. I think when I said the F sharp tuning, I think they call that the vihuela.
Yeah.
And the vihuela is and actually if you go to Mexico, they have something called the vihuela, but the vihuela in some of these older music from the 1500s, it was a different type of instrument shape-wise, but it had 6 strings.
Vihuela de mano?
Now I'm getting out of my...
Translate
I don't want
that.
to just say... No, vihuela is a vihuela.
That's just it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, yeah, it's like a guitar is guitarra.
Yeah.
So some things do translate differently. Piano is a piano.
Yeah. Well, that came from the Italian word for floor.
Well, piano forte.
And then piano forte because it could play soft, which was on the floor, or loud.
Ah, yes. Okay.
I guess actually, let me go back actually because
Okay.
just to my notes, the way I read it might not have actually come out correct.
Sure.
It was actually between the 16th and 19th century that a lot of these changes were coming about.
Okay.
So you might have actually been correct on that one. Some of these changes included, like we said, the courses being added. The violin peg box was replaced by the head we all know today as the machine head.
Yeah, the pegs, you literally, when you're tightening a string, you have the strings are attached to this peg, like a piece of wood that goes through the slots on the headstock. And when you're done tuning the guitar, you have to literally jam the wood of the peg into the neck to keep the strings from loosening. And at some point, I guess when machining got more advanced, you add these machines. It makes it much easier to keep the guitar in tune. And guitars go out of tune a lot.
Yeah.
So you need something that will keep that you can adjust very easily. Versus a piano, you need a technician to come to your house to tune your piano.
I have a cello, and granted, it's not a very nice or great cello, but it's a cello no less. And I just remember trying to get those pegs in there.
And it's scary. You think you're going to break the strings too.
Yeah, my experience with my violin was like I remember that too.
Yeah.
And my pegs didn't fit super well, so it was really hard to get them down in there enough to where the strings wouldn't come
And I
loose.
think on my violins they have now these little they call them fine tuners.
Yeah.
Just because it's so hard to use those, But once you're in tune with those pegs,
you'll stay there.
Yeah.
A second ago, we were talking about the gut strings. Way back when, that was actually how they fretted them as well. They would tie gut strings around where the frets would be.
Oh my gosh.
So
Kind of like a sitar with the movable frets.
Yeah.
Depending on what raga you're gonna play in, you just I'm not gonna play that raga, so I'll just take that fret off. This is my understanding, but that's what I've heard. But that makes sense, yeah.
So so now another difference is between this guitar and the other. I think its ancestors had the frets were actually on the body of the guitar before they actually made it to where the neck extended to the sound hole, which is kind of a funny picture to see.
Say that again.
So the guitar itself, the neck didn't actually extend to the sound hole. You had a piece of wood, like the body would have gone over that, and that body itself had frets on it.
Oh, interesting.
Really weird.
Oh, yeah, I think I have seen that before.
So another one of the changes. That the
Variations on the theme, yes.
Before we landed at today's guitar. The body changed a bit for sonority and stability. It became broader and more shallow with a thinner soundboard. You want to tell us about the soundboard?
So the soundboard, I guess, would be the box. The box.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just like when you're at home, and if you're lucky to have a sound system in your house and you have speakers, sound works through a medium, and sometimes to amplify the sound, you need before it goes out. The farther away you get from sound, the beginning is going to get weaker. So if you have a bigger box, the sound kind of builds. It amplifies.
Mm-hmm.
So some of these old guitars in American music, for example, they have jumbos and things like that, just so you could be heard. Mm-hmm. And that's why banjos are so popular, because you couldn't hear a guitar that well.
Mm-hmm.
So in any case, there are two basic type of guitars with a flat top and then a rounded top like a violin. Mm-hmm. So that has a lot to do with the way the sound gets pushed out of what we call the sound hole, the one hole on the guitar.
Yeah.
And projects out forward away from it. Yeah. So I don't know if that helps at all, but the more you get to modern music, the smaller they become because amplification came around.
Okay.
And also the string sizes on guitars used to be much bigger because the bigger string, same thing, the medium, the more you can project. But that really is physically really daunting. Some of the strings I used to use but it was at a necessity.
Yeah. To be heard.
Now we don't have to worry about that as much because of technology.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful technology.
Yes.
It's great until it doesn't work. A lot of these changes we were talking about were attributed to the work of Antonio Torres of Andalusia. Are you familiar with him?
No. As a builder?
He was known as one of the most important Spanish guitar makers of the 19th century. And like I said, it resulted in today's classical guitar with 3 gut strings, now nylon, as we were saying, and 3 metal spun strings.
That's
right?
correct, yes.
And that eventually became today's 6-string folk rock or whatever, guitar.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's it. You'll never see a 6-string guitar with 6 nylon. Sometimes the big strings are wrapped, they're steel, but they're wrapped around a nylon core. Like it'll be a nylon string and it's wrapped with metal. Mm-hmm. And it just projects more, stays in tune better, and it can handle those frequencies. Yeah.
So the lower notes need to kind of project a little more.
I think you need more of a medium. That's why the strings are bigger. But if you just had one big piece of nylon, I think it would sound pretty thin. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, cool. Moving into the 19th century, there's another Spaniard named Francisco Tárrega.
Tárrega, yeah.
Tárrega?
Yeah.
And he transcribed the music of Bach and Mozart for guitar and kicked off the classical guitar genre.
And so he was a composer in the romantic genre. Mm-hmm. So, and what you think of like romantic, I don't know, and probably the most famous piece is that he wrote is Recuerdos de la Alhambra, Memories of the Alhambra, which is a palace in Granada, I think. And it's just, when you go, it's this amazing, it's from the Moorish culture, so a lot of Arabic. It's just an amazing, anyway, it's this piece, and all the stuff he did is very virtuosic. He just put the guitar to another level as far as virtuosity, but with more modern, more lush harmony. He's kind of set the standard for a long time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Almost kind of bridging into the modern era, Tárrega.
Very good, man. Good guy to know about. Another name you might know from 20th century guitar music is Andres Segovia. He was instrumental in establishing, the guitar as a concert instrument, kind of by showing its technical and expressive qualities. Are you familiar with
Yeah, that piece I just mentioned, that Recuerdos de la Alhambra, my favorite recording of that is his version. Oh. It's probably from the 30s, but he had a way of playing where he would rush the beat and pull back, and it seems, I don't know what the technical term for that is. Yeah, but he was one of the first great concert guitarists. People think he really almost created classical guitar. He didn't, but he made it popular in the United States from his concerts that he would bring. Mm-hmm. So especially in the United States, he had a huge influence on guitarists here that made it popular. But he was kind of like B.B. King was the ambassador of the music of blues around the world. He was probably far for many years the ambassador, even though there were guitarists just as good, arguably, if not better. I don't want to say, There was a couple, but he was just a guitarist. He wasn't a composer, but he did arrange some, is my understanding.
Very nice, very nice. And it sounds like when he was a kid, the guitar was kind of regarded as an instrument of low repute.
Oh, like a folk instrument. It was not for the concert stage or with orchestras or.
So he was raised on cello and piano, and I guess just decided he wanted to rock.
Oh, he was a man on the mission, and like some of the great older now because he passed away maybe in like late 80s, early 90s, and anyway, he really influenced a lot of guitarists through his recordings and through he would have these guitar workshop master classes that he would have.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's fast forward a little bit to the electric guitar. 1931, a man named George Beauchamp, are you familiar with this guy?
No.
And Paul Barth of the National Guitar Corporation designed the first electric guitar. Henry Watson built it. Beauchamp and Barth would later team up with Adolf Rickenbacker. A name many guitarists know. By 1932, they became the first to produce these electric guitars, and it was very popular in the jazz genre.
Yes, and those guitars, if you ever look at them, it looks like you take a tin can and put a neck to it.
Yeah. They called it the frying pan or something?
The frying pan, and it's just the ugliest looking thing. It looks like something that goes with your car. It's like like you put in the. It doesn't look like a guitar, but it was the idea of using electricity and putting a magnet, and the magnet becomes like a microphone, and you plug it into something. It just seems like out of this world. It's like plugging your harmonica into. I guess they do that too now. You know what I'm saying? It just seems, the concept seems so strange, but there was a need. There was something called resonator guitars, which was another technology of trying to solve the same problem. You think of dobros. Mm-hmm. Dobros were the Dobro brothers, and they created this little metal way of projecting sound. Mm-hmm. It was trying to solve the same problem. So they had resonator guitars, but they weighed like 40, 50 pounds. But they were loud, is my understanding. Yeah. If you hear a dobro, it is really loud. So dobro is the same idea. Resonator guitar is like all metal guitar. Mm-hmm. So these guys made that adjustment, and instead of using heavy metal, they just said, let's put a metal magnetic a magnet with electrified to pick up the sound and transmit that sound to a speaker, which could make a lot of sound.
Which to me is just so fascinating. You know?
It is still pretty cool. Ever for fun, sometimes if I got an electric guitar and I'm teaching, and no one has, or we're trying to listen to a song, I'll just put my iPhone to my pickup on my guitar. I don't know who showed me this. And it's a microphone.
Yeah.
It's a microphone.
It's the exact same concept.
It's pretty cool. Interesting.
So, but yeah, those early guitars are weird looking things, you know.
In 1936, Gibson released its ES 150.
Yes.
ES for electric Spanish.
Yes, that's what ES means.
150, do you know where that came from?
Yes, you could get the amp and the guitar for $150.
Yeah.
That's the Charlie Christian guitar.
Yeah.
Who's I mean, there were other guitarists before, Carl Crest, and some of these guys, people played with, I can't think of his name, played with Bing Crosby, I can't think of his name. I should remember this. But any case, Charlie Christian was the first great guitarist. He's from Oklahoma, I believe. And he could play the guitar like a sax player, like the great jazz sax players in New York in the late 30s. And he played with Benny Goodman, and he died very young, but all the recordings he did were amazing. And he was kind of like the visionary.
Yeah.
But he died at like 28, tuberculosis.
That's pretty young.
It's pretty young.
That's pretty young.
If not younger than 28. Yeah.
Even for back.
Yeah.
That wasn't too long ago, really. I mean.
No.
One complaint of this particular model, though, was the uneven volume amongst the strings. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so with certain guitars, certain strings on a steel string guitar are different volumes. Like, my understanding is like the B string is louder than the other strings. Something about the tension and the thickness of the string. So a lot of times on modern guitars, they can make it so that they don't pick up that string as much. But on the other ones, the pickups, those little square things you see on modern electric guitars, or these little anyway, it's harder to adjust them to just adjust one string. And that's still a problem today.
Let's talk about the log.
The log.
Are you familiar at all with the log?
The log is an experimental guitar that Les Paul, the virtuoso guitarist, he was as much of an inventor as he was a guitarist. And he would just take that basic idea of that Rickenbacker where you have just the... Well, guitars would feed back because that box, when you turn up the amplifiers or the speakers, it would pick up the sound coming from the speaker would come back through the guitar because it was close enough, and it would cause this kind of chain reaction, and then it would just cause feedback. It would just, and it was uncontrollable. So he said, well, if I get rid of the body of the guitar, the box, you can hear more. Well, it's no longer an acoustic guitar because if you play an electric guitar not plugged in, it's like a whisper. But he put the pickup in, and then later on, to make it look aesthetically pleasing, he put these other pieces of wood on top and below, so it kind of had the shape of a guitar. But really, modern electric guitars are just this one plank of wood, you know. And
they
then
actually make them like that now too, without the...
Yeah, no, there's different ways. They have bolt-on necks now. You have you use different, but it was just wood, and then he took two other pieces, one on top and on the bottom. He glued them together to get the shape of a guitar.
All aesthetic, all for show.
And he also was one of the first people to do that whole idea of a cutaway.
Cutaway, yeah.
So instead of that hourglass shape, where your fingers are when you're getting up and you hit the actual body of the guitar, he said, "Oh, let's just cut that away."
Yeah.
And it's called a cutaway, and that way you can get the higher notes.
Yeah. Very cool, man. It was just a funny thing if you Google the log by
Les Paul.
Les Paul, yeah.
Most people don't know who Les Paul was. They just think Les Paul was like, I don't know, the owner of Gibson. But he wasn't. He licensed his name. And he also was the first person to come up with 4-track
sound on sound,
or technology. And he would even have it worked into his guitars, so he could loop his guitars like we use now with the pedal. But he was using tapes built inside his guitar.
You're kidding.
Pretty amazing, yeah. And he had this the box. I think he called it the box, and he could do like 4 guitar parts. All this little machine working in his Les Paul on the fly, and he could do
from the log to the box.
Yes. And he also was a master of like using recording techniques, like recording at twice the speed or half the speed, so his guitar sounded twice as high. And he could do all this stuff. Yeah, he's a pretty amazing man.
Pioneer.
He was a pioneer. Yeah.
Well, that leaves a little bit. I guess the only one we haven't mentioned as far as the main, guitars everyone knows about is Leo Fender. The log we were talking about came out in 1940. Moving forward a little bit ahead, in 1950, Leo Fender came out with a Telecaster, originally called the Broadcaster.
That's right. Then they were sued by another company because this other company, maybe it was Rickenbacker, or I can't remember, it was Gretsch, or they said, we have that name, so the Broadcaster, which makes a lot more sense to me why they called it that, because it's an electric guitar and you're broadcasting.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I guess with the whole space age, they call it not the broadcast. We were talking about the.
Well, the Telecaster.
The Telecaster
was originally the Broadcaster before they had to change it, I guess, right?
Yeah. I guess that instead of sound, telecast is visual, like TVs.
Oh.
And then Stratocaster, maybe the air, they're in space. I don't know.
That's the one I was going to ask about. I still don't know what a Stratocaster
Stratus,
means.
like in the sky, so you think space
caster,
age.
Stratus.
Yeah.
I wonder what that Latin word is, stratus. That's a Latin word.
Oh, the stratosphere.
For height,
the stratosphere.
Yeah, so the prefix would have a Latin etymological root.
I don't know. I don't know. But when broadcaster makes more sense than anything else.
Yeah. It's actually putting something out there.
Yeah.
And the Telecaster was actually the first mass-produced solid body guitar. 4 years later is when the Stratocaster came out, which I guess the main difference was it had 3 pickups and a spring tension vibrato, and this well-known comfort contour body.
Yeah, where you put your right arm, normally you play in a guitar, it's an edge, so it kind of digs into your arm. So I guess they could just bevel that, so when you play, it doesn't feel like you're digging into your forearm all the time. Yeah.
Imagine.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Design form, it's pretty cool.
Well, by the 50s and 60s, the guitar made its way into pop music and rock music, and the rest is history as far as electric guitars are concerned. Do you have any favorites that you want to talk about? Any favorite guitar
Favorite
players?
guitars?
Electric guitarist, I guess. Rock
Guitarist? Well, I guess Jimmy Page was like, as a kid, was like my favorite. Just, it's not, it was such a neat mix of like rock and roll, just rock and roll, like Elvis kind of rock and roll, and then and then blues, because he could play a lot of these great blues lines like other guitarists, and then he had this heavy metal thing. So it's just that whole mix of styles. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there are people who can, at his best, he was hard to top, but he wouldn't always play at that level. Mm-hmm. But he's just so creative, is what I like about him. Yeah. So that's just because I was into him so many years, and even now he's so sloppy, but I still like it. Just sloppy with the way he plays his right hand.
Perfectly sloppy.
Yes, but it works. So that was a big one for me growing up. More than Jimi Hendrix, honestly. And I just I don't know.
Yeah.
You can always find someone better. But that's what I liked,
Well, better can be a subjective term.
Like just the typical guys that you hear about. The Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Page.
Jimmy Herring.
No, he was one. I don't think he was born. Maybe he was born back then.
I was just thinking Jimmy.
More just the British blues guys. I was not into I got into the fusion thing later. But then I love the jazz guys like the Wes Montgomerys, hold on, let me think. Kenny Burrell, Barney Kessel is a big one. Those guys are older, Jim Hall, jazz guys, so they were recording the 50s and just playing some amazing stuff. So that guy, I got into that too. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, we know you compose music.
Yeah.
Do you have a composition process? Is there a particular way you like to compose or approach?
Sometimes you can start with a harmony, or you like a chord, because I play chords as part of what I do. If I were a drummer, I would probably start with a rhythm,
right,
or a pattern.
Right.
So a lot of times I'll start with a good harmonic part, and then I studied some form in college and structures but generally I still think in more of the pop song format when I write something.
Sure.
Like a main section, there's a bridge, there's a breakdown of just structurally things like
right.
that. Sometimes I write the melody first, and then I'll keep just tinkering away at the harmony. Sometimes you start with a rhythm. You have to think, what are you writing for? Are you writing for a jazz band? Are you writing for like a person on the piano? Mm-hmm. And that affects how you write. It's arranging. So I'll do that. Writing in what key? So sometimes I'll take a tune and I'll write, and then you just try it in different keys. And something about the key relates on the instrument, but then sometimes I'll write on different instruments. Sure. So I'm using all these starting points. Start on the guitar, or I'll start on the organ, or on the piano. Sometimes if I write it down, I'll usually write it with pen. I wish I was that good. With a pencil on paper. I'm not good about writing using a keyboard and Finale.
Right. Yeah.
I'll transcribe things that way, but so yeah, depending. It just depends, Or, if I'm trying something like more open, I'll try to find certain rhythms or certain grooves, certain kind of chord progressions that are great for improv. But if I'm just doing a piece, like a written out piece, you have to have a spark of something. So sometimes I'll write something and I still have a little, you just keep it in a drawer, and you bring it out. Sometimes, I got this bit here. Right. And then how can I work this into a larger piece? So sometimes I'll start from beginning to end. Sometimes I'll write something and write it 10 times. I've done some it's like a mental challenge. And then from one of those, you come back later and then, I like that one. And then you go and perform it and you say, I need to change it again. So it's always, unless I'm not a person who has a deadline, I don't write for commercials or movies. Right. When I write tunes, I do them for performances. So there's no deadline. I can always rearrange it. And
I can write on a deadline. I generally don't. I generally like to take my time and know that I've done my best work when there's when there's a thing like that.
It seems like it's hard to put your creative. It seems like it would kind of kill the creative buzz.
Well, you can do it.
Under the gun.
People do it.
Yeah.
You know, I've met people who do jingles and people who do advertising agency jobs, and that is what you're paid to do.
Yeah.
You know, and people do movies and theater.
The few times I've written on a deadline, it's not so much killing your buzz as making your buzz extremely efficient. You know, it's about, okay, I don't have time to sit here and marinate on this. I have to make this decision to move on to the next one.
That's true. You can sit and just, sometimes I used to, when I was trying this, you know, you're trying so many things, and sometimes like that tune that I played earlier off that album, it was a good melody. Don't just keep it simple, you know. You know, a good idea is a good idea. So if you dress it up with a lot of fancy stuff around it, that's cool. Or you could just play the melody. A good melody is a good melody. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times that's good. Now, if you have a great chord progression, you could probably write 20 different melodies, and that's what improvisation really is just composing on the fly. So the more I do it, I try to play more simple music instead of this kind of real cerebral kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, I guess if someone tells me to make a jingle for a bubblegum commercial, I'm not going to be as married to the art of it. I'm just going to probably bust out something kind of poppy for them, you know?
Yeah.
Bubblegummy.
Yeah, happy. Sometimes it's just a mood. You just need a mood.
Yeah.
And say if you're working with somebody, what key can they sing in? What range? And then you just go, okay, then it's always the parameters. If you set up some parameters, then it's just like learning when you're major scale, you're avoiding all the bad sounding notes. Later on, you can learn how to use them. Same thing if you set up some parameters. You know, like I'm not gonna have this open ended thing. It's gotta be a minute and a half long, this song or this jingle. And then you just write and say, I don't have time for a bridge. And no, it's just gotta be get to it.
Yeah.
You know, ba-doop, here I am for your, you know, selling, you know, what is it, toothpaste or
Mayonnaise.
Yeah, you know. So, yeah.
And it sounds like you do when you're composing. You are actually sitting there notating.
I'll just do it or now you can just record it. You can record it, and then if it's worth writing down. Sometimes it's fun just to write out stuff. Mm-hmm. And see what happens from there, or just try different voicings, or do, you know, play with the length of phrases, or it just depends.
Yeah.
I wish I was that good at it. I mean, I've written a few things that I like to listen to, but I'm not like putting out stuff weekly.
Uh-huh.
And I think recently, because unfortunately where we live right now, there aren't too many places to play jazz, and when you do, I think there's an expectation of less of the obscure, you know, and standards are pretty obscure to most people already. So if you're playing a lot of more avant-garde stuff or mixed meter or weird rhythms or, you know, that kind of stuff, it can turn people off. And you want people to react. You don't want to just turn people off. So I'm not going to be writing something obscure and then never hear it. I want to write something that I want to have played.
Right.
I want to play something I've heard.
Yeah.
Is what I was trying to say.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, last few little words here.
Okay.
Any imparting wisdom for aspiring guitarists?
I think just it's always got to be about keep it where you enjoy it. And if you feel like you're in a rut, once you're learning, because it always happens, you want to get better, or maybe you don't. Maybe you just enjoy playing it. But even if you're just happy playing the same songs, do something new occasionally, or try to change it up, who you play with, or learning different types of songs. Because I keep meeting people who they just like a one-trick pony. They just can only do one thing, and then they get bored and they don't pick it up. And the reason is they get bored. And
Right.
sometimes if you put yourself in situations, just by learning something other than your one favorite band,
Right.
just learn some songs by other bands, or learn to play some melodies on the guitar. Or people who just do melodies, learn to play some chords and play songs.
Yeah.
Because that's the reverse. There's some people who just play songs, and some people who just like to noodle, diddle, 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 you know, noodling as I call it, and then they can't play. Okay, play me something. Just go diddle, diddle, diddle. They can't play a song. So when I teach kids, I always teach them learn to play the song, then we can do all the noodling stuff.
Yeah. You stay. Don't get too comfortable in your comfort zone.
Yeah.
sum up.
Yeah, I'm just talking for beginners, and you
Right.
know, when you're worrying about getting a gig, and that's a whole different thing.
Yeah,
Ooh.
yeah. We
That's
talk about that a lot.
That's our one of our closing questions. Actually,
Oh, what is the question?
give us some advice on working with other musicians.
That's hard because I'm pretty exacting, and I can be pretty annoying to some musicians, but because I'm pretty direct, and so it's always a mix of how much is it worth getting in a confrontation if over a disagreement, like this music should be this way or that way, or this is too fast, blah blah blah. Always try to be polite to people because disagreements are going to happen. And if you're polite, that goes a long way. But at some point, if I'm just talking hypothetical, sometimes you have to say, hey, this isn't working, blah, 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 but not make it a personal, I don't like you
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, your drum is slow. I hate your guts. You know this, and that happens because people get so. You know, if you love playing music,
Why do you slow down all the time?
no, if you slow down, you know what's wrong with you as a person. You know, sometimes it can be frustrating, but you have to realize it's music and it's not them as a person. Unless, say, they have a drug problem or they're drunk.
Then it's them as a person.
Then it is their fault. And then, but it's, you know, yelling at them isn't going to help. So that's the first thing. Try to be prepared when you play with other people. Just know the song. You don't have to have it all from memory, but know you can get through it, and it makes it fun. And that helps you keeping a gig. And also, wherever you play, be polite to the people who work in that establishment, if it's a restaurant.
Gracious.
Yeah, just be nice, or a church, you know, or a bar, whatever. There's very different places, same attitude, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
And
cool.
be aware, just like don't play too loud. I'm a guitar player, and we like to play loud. Be aware of your surroundings. Know when it's right to play loud. Know when it's right not to. And it's very subjective because some people will think, oh, it's too loud, and the next person will say, oh, it's fine. So
I've
you
learned some hard lessons in the past with groups I've been in about the difference between how loud we were allowed to play versus how loud we should have been playing.
Well, I'll tell you a little story. You know, I played pretty loud, and then I would notice I'd play with some of these R&B bands, which is a newer thing. I guess I didn't tell you that. I play with R&B bands too, and some of these guys play loud, but that's just expected. And you think, but it's because it's keyboards and bass. It's not just the shrill guitar. So I would try to keep up with them, and I'd play, and they'd all get applause, you know, and then I'd play nothing. And this go on for months, and it's just because I'm like the, you know, I just the odd looking guy on stage, and just in the back there, and so one day I said, let me just put a mic on my amp. You know, I was blaring it. So I did it, and people, oh, it was great. And I realized they just couldn't
They
hear
couldn't hear
me.
you.
Wow.
It was an amp that just was very directional. So I have to tell people sometimes that, you know, I'm playing loud to where you're sitting, but it's not always, and it's not just, it's just that one amp. If I had you have lots of amp in here, by the way, but I only have one amp that I use, and so it's just the nature of that amp, you know. If I have another amp, I do have another amp that I have that has, instead of one speaker, it has two speakers, and so it's more open.
Yeah.
The wide, what would you call this? The
More throat or
more wider angle where the sound reaches. So it's all subjective when you play out. I'll play in one bar, I'll play the same volume, different night, same bar, and there'll be a different reaction. So when same thing when you're listening to people, same drummer. I've just used drummers. They can be bass players. They can be playing, and they'll just. So you have to try to keep yourself in check. You know.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of keeping in check, what about that ego? How do you keep the ego in check? Just remind yourself.
Just remind yourself. What are we doing? This is not. We're not foreclosing on a house here. This is music.
Nobody's life is on the line.
I've been on both
ideally.
sides. I've been on both sides of it. I've given it and I've taken it, and usually it doesn't happen. Usually, but it does when it happens. It happens. But you know, yeah. So I try not to be in the situation. Sometimes it's better just if you see that situation happening, just don't be in that situation. Like if you find yourself getting a situation with certain people where it gets kind of back and forth, then is it worth being in that situation? So I've left, like, whether it's a church gig or a band, or sometimes it's not worth it. So I've walked away from things just because, with no arguments or anything, because it's stressful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it shouldn't be stressful.
No.
It's stressful enough just playing the music. It shouldn't be
That's
stressful
right.
to deal. Yeah,
We're supposed to enjoy this.
yeah.
There are more profitable professions in the world if it's not fun.
That's
right?
exactly right. We're not doing it for the money.
Right.
Well, we are, but
well,
not,
I mean, we are, but yeah.
we would be in a
Ish.
different profession if we were, if we were just for money. Period.
So, last thing, how can people get to your music?
I have a website called Carlos Pino. So my last name is spelled Pino.
Awesome.
So Carlos Pino Music.
And we will link to that on our website.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And just put my name in YouTube. Put Carlos Pino guitar, and there's actually another guitarist. There's several with my name. There's a guy named Spain. There's another guy in Colombia. There's a guy on the West Coast. I don't know. But if you look to my website, we have links to YouTube videos, so you'll know it's the Carlos who's talking right now.
Awesome.
The Carlos we're hearing, and that was carlospinomusic.com, you said? And can people buy your CDs, or do you have anything?
If they contact me, I'll be fine to sell. I have 2 different CDs. I'd like to start working on one soon. I want to do an album of just solo guitar and some duets, and I like doing, like I was talking about, more new age type thing. Mm-hmm. But yes, they can contact me if they're interested in purchasing either of those CDs. That'd be great.
So if they want to contact you, they can email you from the website?
Yes.
Your website?
Yes. There's a link where they can fill out some information, whether it be for lessons or for recordings. And I'll get back in touch with them. Mm-hmm.
Well, Carlos, this has been fantastic.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, I talked your heads off. But,
That's okay.
That's a lot of talking.
That's what a podcast is.
Yeah.
We just talk people's heads.
Okay, I was happy to do it. Thanks, guys.
And we really appreciate you bringing your guitar also and playing some examples. That was really, really nice. Very pretty guitar.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Sounded
Yes,
great.
the Bulgarian guitar, yes.
Okay, so we're going to take us out with another one of the originals. What's this one called?
This is one I did off a record, the same one as the piece that you heard at the beginning of the podcast. And it's called December, and it's another open-ended, it's almost like a soundtrack type of sounding piece. But hope you like it.
Perfect for bumper music, right?
Yes.
All right, we'll see you guys again. Thanks again for listening.
What instrument are we going to cover next? You'll just have to keep on listening. If you have questions or comments for us, send them to info@musicstudent101.com. You can reach Carlos and hear his music at carlospinomusic.com.